A colleague once shared a chilling story with me about something she experienced. Here's her account. Back then, I had just graduated from university and moved to this town, renting an apartment on the 4th floor of an old, narrow building. The place was run down, but it had one undeniable advantage: it was spotless. The building was managed by a kind elderly woman who kept the place immaculately clean. When I first came to see the apartment, its cleanliness immediately won me over. Plus, the basement had coin-operated washers and dryers, which was incredibly convenient. The elderly woman lived in the basement, right across from the laundry room. The only downside was the lack of an elevator. 4 floors didn't seem like much, but climbing those stairs every day was a headache. Still, I often told myself it was good exercise and might even help me lose weight. I lived peacefully in that apartment for 2 years, and my career was gradually taking off. Life was carefree, and everything seemed calm. But recently, something strange started happening whenever I did laundry. Every time I went down to the basement and past the elderly woman's management office, I noticed the door was slightly ajar, as if someone was peeking out. At first, I didn't think much of it, assuming the old lady had simply forgotten to close the door. But after it happened several times, I started to feel uneasy. I began paying closer attention and realized that whenever I went downstairs, the door would slowly open, as if waiting for something. When I entered the laundry room, it would close. And when I finished and left, the door would open again, as if someone was watching me. This went on for about a month, and I grew increasingly suspicious, though I had no idea what was really going on. Then one day, a tall, thin man suddenly appeared in the laundry room. In a low voice, he introduced himself as the new building manager and told me the elderly woman had quit. He claimed he had taken over the management a month ago, which coincided with when I first noticed the strange behavior of the office door. I felt a chill run down my spine. He smiled at me and asked which floor I lived on. I mumbled a vague response and quickly excused myself. A few nights later, I came home from work and noticed something was off in my apartment. It seemed like the books on my table had been moved, and the clothes in my closet were no longer neatly arranged. At first, I told myself I was just tired and imagining things. But this kept happening for several days, with small signs of intrusion almost every day. I started to suspect someone had been entering my room, but every time I checked the locks, they were intact. My unease grew, but I didn't take immediate action. One night, I fell asleep on the couch while watching TV. I usually turned off the lights when watching TV because I often dozed off. In my half-asleep state, I was startled awake by the sound of faint footsteps in the hallway. At first, I thought it was a neighbor passing by, but when I peeked through the crack under my door, I saw a shadow stop right outside my apartment. Then, I heard the sound of my doorknob slowly turning. My heart raced, and in a panic, I turned up the TV volume to maximum, filling the room with noise. The sound of the doorknob stopped immediately. The figure stood silently outside my door for a few seconds before slowly turning and walking away. The new manager wasn't as diligent as the elderly woman, and the building grew dirtier. The tenants started complaining. One day, a woman in her 30s who lived below me mentioned that every time she did laundry, some of her undergarments went missing. She had reported it to the manager, but he always stood uncomfortably close, making her feel uneasy. Her story immediately reminded me of my own encounters with the manager. Whenever I ran into him on the stairs, he would greet me politely, but I always felt like he was trying to get too close. Especially when I turned to go upstairs, he would stand still, his eyes fixed on my back. When I brought this up with my neighbor, she nodded in agreement, saying she had experienced the same thing. This made us even more wary of the manager's behavior. One quiet weekend night, I had just finished work and was climbing the stairs to my apartment. When I reached the second floor, a sharp scream shattered the peace, The sound came from the basement. I rushed down and saw the new college student who had just moved into the second floor, sitting on the floor of the laundry room, her hair gripped by the manager. I shouted, "Stop! I'm calling the police." At the sound of my voice, the manager shoved the student aside, knocked me over, and fled. Other tenants, hearing the commotion, came running. I chased after him, yelling, "Stop him!" The manager, now frantic, pushed people out of his way, even knocking over an elderly man. The tenants banded together to corner him. A middle-aged man tackled him from the side, bringing him to the ground. The landlord arrived at the police station soon after the manager was caught. When the landlord saw the man, he was shocked and confused. He had never hired this person. Further investigation revealed that the so-called new manager was an imposter. The landlord had been trying to contact the elderly woman for the past 2 months, as she had suddenly gone missing, not answering calls or messages. The imposter calmly confessed to his crimes. He admitted to killing the elderly woman and burying her body in the dirt behind the apartment building. The area was usually deserted, and he had even poured cement over the ground to mask the smell of decomposition. Some tenants had complained about a strange odor, but he lied, claiming it was from a dead dog nearby. The police searched his management office and found a large stash of stolen women's undergarments, along with other missing items, some of which belonged to tenants from nearby buildings. These discoveries horrified everyone in the apartment. The building was quickly sealed off by the police, and we, the innocent tenants, were forced to leave our homes and stay elsewhere for 3 days. To reassure us and prevent us from moving out due to fear, the landlord announced a significant rent reduction for the next 2 years. In the end, my colleague told me that despite the lingering fear from the incident, she stayed in the apartment for 7 more years, due to financial constraints before finally being able to move out. I never thought inheriting this old house would bring such terrifying experiences. The house was located on the outskirts of the city. Although a bit old, the surroundings were quiet and peaceful, and with plenty of rooms. I decided to rent a few of them to help cover my living expenses. The first tenant was a young woman named Jessie. She didn't talk much, but she was always polite, giving off a quiet and mysterious vibe. When she moved in, she only brought a suitcase and a few books. After a bit of simple unpacking, she began her new life. At first, everything was calm. Jessie left early and returned late each day. Occasionally, she would cook simple meals in the kitchen. Her routine was so quiet and regular that it felt like she was barely there. But soon, I started hearing strange noises at night. The sounds seemed to come from upstairs, soft footsteps, sometimes accompanied by faint scraping sounds, as if someone was moving around. At first, I didn't pay much attention, assuming Jessie was getting up at night for water or to use the bathroom. But as time went on, the noises grew more frequent, sometimes lasting until the early hours of the morning. One night, while making tea in the kitchen, I ran into Jessie returning home from work. She looked a bit tired, carrying a bag of groceries from the supermarket. I hesitated, but decided to bring up the noises I'd been hearing. "Jessie, have you heard any strange noises at night lately?" I asked cautiously. She froze for a moment, then shook her head and answered softly, "No, I usually sleep through the night. I haven't heard anything." I frowned slightly and continued, "But I've been hearing footsteps upstairs late at night, like someone is walking around. Have you noticed anything unusual?" Jessie seemed puzzled. She lowered her head, thinking for a moment, then said, "Maybe it's just the old structure of the house making noises. Sometimes when it's windy, I also hear strange sounds." Her explanation seemed reasonable, but I still felt uneasy. The footsteps sounded too real to be just the wind. However, since Jessie didn't seem concerned, I decided not to press the issue and dropped the subject. One weekend night, I couldn't sleep and was scrolling through my phone when I heard the sounds again. I glanced at the clock. It was already 3 a.m. Was Jessie still awake? Feeling uneasy, I decided to go upstairs and check. As I reached the hallway on the second floor, I froze in shock. A man was standing outside Jessie's room. He seemed startled to see me, then quickly turned and ran toward the nearby window, leaping out and vanishing into the night. I shouted and rushed to Jessie's door, banging on it urgently. The door was unlocked, and I pushed it open. The room was dimly lit, and Jessie lay on the bed, seemingly asleep. I approached her, trying to wake her, but she didn't respond. My heart pounded as a wave of dread washed over me, and I immediately called for an ambulance. The ambulance and police arrived quickly. Jessie was taken to the hospital, while the police began investigating. They reviewed the surveillance footage from the street corner and confirmed that the man had indeed entered through the window. When Jessie woke up at the hospital, we told her everything. She turned pale with shock. When the police showed her a still image from the surveillance footage, asking if she recognized the man, she trembled and said he looked like her ex-boyfriend. Based on Jessie's description, the police soon identified the suspect and found powerful sleeping pills and some tools at his residence. It turned out that the man was indeed her ex-boyfriend. After learning from her social media that she had moved here, he began planning everything. Knowing Jessie had a habit of taking sleeping pills before bed, he secretly broke in and replaced her usual medication with a stronger version, causing her to fall into a deep sleep every night without realizing his presence. The most chilling part was that he had been doing this for several nights already, and the footsteps I heard were his. Jessie was deeply shaken after learning the truth. She confessed that she never imagined her ex-boyfriend would do something so terrifying, nor did she realize that she had been so vulnerable while he crept into her room after night. After the incident, Jessie moved out of the house, saying she needed a fresh start. As for me, I decided to stop renting out the rooms. Even though the ordeal was over, every time I walk through the familiar hallways late at night, I can't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. During my sophomore year, I decided to move out of the dormitory. Although dorm life was lively, I always felt like I lacked personal space. So, after browsing rental websites for a few days, I finally found a house that seemed perfect. It was located in the suburbs, quiet, and reasonably priced. I immediately contacted the landlords and scheduled a time to visit. The landlords were a couple in their 50s, named Tom and Mary. They seemed kind and friendly, always wearing warm smiles. When I arrived, they welcomed me warmly and gave me a tour of the house. Although the house wasn't large, it was cozy and well furnished, especially their son Jack's room, which was spacious, bright, and fully equipped. Our son Jack is about your age. He's studying abroad now, Tom said with a hint of pride and longing. We decided to rent out his room, since it's just sitting here unused. I was very pleased with the room and decided to rent it on the spot. On the day I moved in, Tom and Mary helped carry my luggage and even prepared a lavish dinner to welcome me. From that day forward, they cared for me meticulously, making me feel incredibly warm and valued. Mary would often bake cookies or cakes and bring them to my room, while Tom would check in on me, asking about my studies and life. Their kindness made me feel like I had become part of their family. One semester passed quickly, and I began packing to go home for a summer vacation. While I was gathering my belongings, Tom suddenly knocked on my door. "Alan, we have a surprise for you," Tom said with a mysterious smile. "A surprise?" I asked, feeling a bit puzzled, but following him downstairs nonetheless. Mary stood in the living room, holding a small box. "This is a gift for you, to thank you for keeping us company," she said softly. I opened the box to find a delicate bracelet inside. "This is too much, I can't accept it," I said, feeling a bit embarrassed. "Don't be shy, Alan. We truly think of you as family," Mary reassured me, patting my shoulder. "Come, we have one more thing to show you." They led me to the basement door, and Tom opened it. "We've been sorting through Jack's old things. Maybe you'll find something you like," he said. I hesitated, but eventually followed them down the stairs. The basement was dimly lit, with a musty smell lingering in the air. I looked around and saw piles of cardboard boxes and old furniture stacked against the walls. "These all belong to Jack. Feel free to take a look," Tom said, and before I could respond, he suddenly shut the basement door. I heard the lock click into place, and panic surged through me. "Tom, Mary," I shouted, banging on the door. "Let me out. What are you doing?" Tom's muffled voice came through the door, calm but chilling. "Alan, we really like you. We can't let you leave us." My heartbeat quickened as cold sweat trickled down my forehead. I realized I was trapped and had to find a way out. The basement window was too small to crawl through. The only exit was the locked door. I forced myself to stay calm and think clearly. My only option was to play along and wait for the right moment. Over the next few days, Tom and Mary brought me food and water regularly. They remained as gentle and caring as ever, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. I pretended to accept their kindness, even chatting with them to lower their guard. One day, I heard the garage door opening. I rushed to the window and saw their car pulling out with both of them inside. Knowing they would be gone for a while, I realized this was my chance. I immediately began searching for anything that could help me escape. In one of the boxes, I found an old screwdriver and decided to use it to pry open the lock. I carefully inserted the screwdriver into the door crack and twisted it with all my strength. The lock creaked, but wouldn't budge. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and tried again. Finally, I heard a faint click as the lock released. I pushed the door open and bolted up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I dashed out of the house and onto the street, flagging down a passing car and begging the driver to take me to the police station. After listening to my story, the police immediately went to Tom and Mary's house. When they opened the basement, they found it filled with Jack's old belongings and countless photographs of Jack. What sent a chill down my spine was how eerily similar Jack looked to me. The police soon arrested the couple. Not long after, they summoned my parents and me to the station. They told us that Tom and Mary had confessed everything. Jack had died years ago on a tragic accident. Unable to cope with their grief, they became obsessed with finding someone to replace him. When they saw my picture on the rental website, they became fixated, believing I was the perfect substitute. At first, their intentions were seemingly innocent. They genuinely wanted to care for me like a son. But as time passed, their obsession grew. They couldn't bear the thought of losing me, fearing that I would disappear just like Jack. In their twisted minds, trapping me was the only way to keep me with them forever. After hearing this, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine, but also a strange sense of sorrow. For some reason, I wanted to see them one last time and ask if everything they did was truly out of love. I begged the police to let me visit them, but my parents adamantly refused. "They hurt you. You must never have anything to do with them again," my father said sternly. My mother squeezed my hand tightly, her eyes filled with worrying. "Alan, we only want you to be safe. Please, don't take any more risks." Seeing their concern, I didn't press the issue any further. I never saw Tom and Mary again. Yet sometimes, when I think about them, I don't feel afraid, just sad.